You know, I do think there is a future in this. Despite everything that I might have said or anything that other people might say, I still think there is a future in this. There's a lot of people who feel very connected to wooden boats, and I can't agree more, really. I mean, there's something special about them.
Hey, welcome back. It's time for the weekly update for the Western Flyer Restoration. Boat school. You're going to hear those two words a lot in this episode. That's what folks around here call this place, the boat school. It's officially called the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building. And over the last 40 years, it's cast a pretty impressive shadow across this community. You're going to hear the word so many times, you're going to think this episode is just about the boat school. And that'd be pretty cool in itself. But this episode is actually about the journey to becoming a shipwright. I sat down with 3 of the younger shipwrights working on the restoration to hear their story, how they got started in this industry, what drew them to Port Townsend, what it's like to be a shipwright, and what the future holds. So in this episode, let's just listen to their words about the journey to becoming a shipwright.
My name's Jordan Bard. I'm a shipwright at the Port Townsend Shipwrights Co-op. How did I get into this? When I was a younger person, I went to college, studied physics and botany, and it was a great time and I learned quite a bit, but realized after a couple years it wasn't really going to be the fulfilling thing that I needed. Did lots of different jobs. I worked in a printing press, I worked for contractors, a lot of dirtbag lifestyle. I had spent some of that time, very fortunately, with some really talented woodworkers who were kind of starting their own journey down that path, and a few of them made a big impression on me. My father was a house builder, carpenter, so growing up we built a lot of stuff together, and you know, I was nothing but a rough carpenter up until that point. He made a big impression and he really laid the foundation for all of the skills that I've been able to develop since then. At a certain point during that journey, I kind of realized I needed to make more long-term plans and commitments in my life, and knew that it was time to kind of dive into something.
My name is Ginny Wilson and I am a shipwright. I decided to get into boat building, shipwright work. I guess it's been a long journey. When I was a kid, I loved to build things, and I always kind of wanted to be in construction or be in woodworking, but didn't quite know how to get there. It wasn't something I was raised around or encouraged to do. It just wasn't kind of part of my upbringing. I went to university, moved to Montana and worked at a nonprofit organization, commercial tendered, fished in Alaska for 3 years. I guided bicycle tours for 3 years all over the western United States and Canada. That's when I decided that I needed, or I felt focus on fulfilling a dream and trying to learn a craft that I could work on for the rest of my life. I found the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building here in Port Townsend. Spent a intensive year at the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building, which is in Port Hadlock, and it's a year-long program, and I did a large craft track. I've done apprenticeships, so I apprenticed in Tasmania with graduates of the boat school, finish building a boat for their boat festival, the Australian Wooden Boat Festival.
Getting nice. Reverse bendo.
I had a friend who's living up here in Port Townsend and came and hung out with her for a week and kind of just saw what was going on, got to see how beautiful of a place this was, and went and did a tour of the school, and I was pretty much sold. Worked for a contractor for 6 months, saved up my tuition, and tried to do whatever I could to put money towards going here, and I made the leap knowing that whatever happened, I would be in a much better place than I started, and wherever life took me afterwards, I would have a lot going for me.
The boat school is an amazing place because there are people from all walks of life. I went to school with 18-year-olds and I went to school with 7-year-olds.
So I'm 22, went to school, Ballard High School. We were one of the few high schools in all of Seattle to have a woodshop program. So that's where I started doing woodshop. Started sophomore year, did it every other year. I think I ended up having maybe 8 semesters worth of it throughout high school. Kind of fell in love with it, and then getting to the end of high school, I knew I didn't want to go to college. Didn't want to have any job related to it really, so manual labor was kind of what I leaned towards, but I worked with my dad a little bit as a carpenter, and I knew that didn't really tickle my fancy. And the boat school, my dad had always wanted to go to the boat school. Actually, he loved wooden boats. I knew nothing about them. I didn't even know they existed. And he told me about the boat school when I was 18. So I was like, well, let's go up. Let's go check it out. Let's see. Because I was more interested in the woodworking. I'd heard all about it. Oh, it's a great woodworking school. And so I went up there, fell in love, was like, I'm going to go to the boat school. And that was it. And then after that summer, after senior year, went to the boat school. Didn't even really know much about boats still. Didn't really care much about boats, but I wanted to be a better woodworker, and the boat school seemed to be the best place to do that. Throughout my time at the boat school, I slowly kind of started to really like boats more and more and more. And then by the end of the whole program, I was like, wow, I'd like to do this. This would be fun. This would be fun. And then I think within the last couple weeks of boat school, I asked my instructor actually, Lee O'Connor, who worked briefly on the build too, and he has worked here for years prior to the project. I asked him if he'd help me get a job in the boatyard, and he said yes, yes. So then came up here, did an interview, and then the Monday after I graduated boat school, started up here, started working, and been working here ever since. My name is Lachlan Carlson. I'm a shipwright at the Port Townsend Shipwrights Co-op.
It's a male-dominated industry, and I am not a male. I didn't grow up thinking or being encouraged to be in the trades or to do these kinds of jobs. It wasn't expected of me, and so it's a little bit. It felt far more daunting for me just to like dive in. And going to school was great because you learn, and you're building while you learn, and you can mess up. And it's okay, and you learn how to fix your mess up, and it is a really great, safe environment.
All right, let's hold right there.
A quote from a book by a man named Mark Manson. He says that life is a series of problems. It's how we handle those problems, but happiness comes from solving problems.
Putting in a frame is like it feels like a milestone in the construction of a boat. You know, you're giving the form, the final form to what you're building. So it feels like a momentous thing. It's also quite a visceral experience, especially framing a boat that size. The frames are somewhere near 4x3, huge chunks of wet white oak. You know, they're no small pieces of wood. So it's quite the process, and it feels momentous, it feels visceral.
I'd say we had about 10 minutes, honestly. People give you all sorts of different answers for how long you have to work with steamed wood. I've heard some people say 30 seconds, which is, I don't want to say it's flat out wrong, but we were working those frames for 10, sometimes 20 minutes at a time, and they were still pliable, and they were 3 inches thick and 4 inches wide. Working with the framing crew was really fun. That was super fun. That's something that I will probably never get to do quite the same. And then working on the stem, that was probably my favorite. That was my favorite project, flat out. That was the once in a lifetime very unique. I just get to close in on one aspect, and it's mine to work with. And then when I'm done with it, then we throw it up there. Then I work with other people.
The next phase was more or less our planking job, and Tim and Pete did a fantastic job basically coming up with our full planking plan. It's one of the more finicky parts of putting a boat together. You can't just put them up there in any, random order. You want it to look nice, you want it to look beautiful. You want it to look like you knew what you're doing the whole time. So Tim and Pete came up with a great planking plan, and we were fortunate enough to get some amazing SIPO. You got your master shipwrights, probably the more experienced people in the crew that you're working with, who are patterning and laying out, from one edge to another consecutively on both sides, tracing and mirroring planks. You got another person or a couple people cutting out those planks, and then you have another couple people hanging those planks. And in this way, you kind of make this extremely efficient. You'd be surprised at how fast you can plank a boat when you have that type of system in place.
It's all interesting because it's always different. Every project is different that I've worked on so far, and it presents new challenges, and I'm constantly learning something new.
The most interesting part about this job is just how varied everything is. There's so many parts to a wooden boat, so many parts. And no wooden boat is like another wooden boat. Even if they're the same model, built by the same person, it's probably something different in each one of them. I've had at least 4 different peers of mine walk through the shop and say, wow, I've never gotten to see a project like this done in my entire life, in 35 years of working.
In my own narrow view, I think I'm just at the beginning still.
I like being scared and being challenged, and that's when I find I grow the most.
A lot of the time when I'm working on boats, you get these moments of reflection where you feel like you're reaching out to the past. One of my corking mallets is an old Drew mallet that I think I know I'm at least the 5th owner of, going back to Union Corkers in Seattle.
That's it, the end of another episode in the story of the Western Flyer restoration. And I hope you enjoyed this one. It was great making it. I sat down with each one of these young shipwrights for almost an hour, and I heard their story about moving to Port Townsend, going to the boat school, and their first days at the Port Townsend Shipwrights. It brought back a lot of memories. I went to that exact same school back in the fall of 1988. I was a bright-eyed wannabe shipwright, and I moved up here from Colorado and I enrolled in the school. That was 32 years ago. I've never left Port Townsend, and I still love wood boats. This is actually a photograph of me back in my mid-20s. I'm wrestling in a homemade Alaskan chainsaw mill through a piece of black locust with Ernie Baird. It's as cold and wet and dark in the photograph as it appears. But the project is going again. There are 3 or 4 shipwrights working on the project daily, but there are 0 visitors allowed in the building. I want to make that clear, and I'll make sure that I post an update when they finally do start letting visitors back into the building. It'll probably be mid-June. But there are a lot of great things coming up on my channel. I've got some really interesting side stories that I'm starting to put together, so make sure you subscribe or tune back regularly to see what those updates are. But until next week or next video, thanks for watching.
I like my tools big. I might be small, but I like my tools big. I gotta make up for it.